He was a monument to American ambition, a self-made emperor in Italian leather and Swiss watches, a man who had clawed his way from a trailer park in Alabama to the Forbes 400 list, who had turned a single food truck into a restaurant empire that spanned 43 states. His name, emblazoned on storefronts from Seattle to Miami, had become synonymous with success, with grit, with the promise that anyone, absolutely anyone, could make it in America if they just worked hard enough. Vincent Shaw, founder and CEO of Shaw's Table, the people's billionaire, the bootstrap legend, the man who never forgot where he came from, except he had forgotten. He'd forgotten a lot of things, convenient things, uncomfortable things, things that didn't fit the narrative he'd constructed, the story he told on talk shows and in glossy magazine profiles, the myth he had built, brick by careful brick, until even he believed it was true. She was a whisper in polyester and comfortable shoes, a woman who had learned that survival meant silence, that speaking up meant consequences, that the world didn't care about your truth if it contradicted someone else's profit margin. Her name was Claire. Just Claire, no last name on her uniform tag. No story, no past, just another middle-aged woman serving overpriced pasta in a restaurant designed to look rustic and authentic. While charging Manhattan prices in downtown Nashville, their collision was inevitable, not because the universe cared about justice, but because lies, no matter how carefully maintained, eventually meet the people who remember the truth. On a Friday night in October, in a restaurant called Harvest and Hearth, one of Shaw's flagship locations, a wrong order would trigger an explosion, a public tirade. Performance of wounded pride and billionaire rage. But it would end with something far more dangerous than bad publicity. It would end with a woman's quiet voice, saying 5 words that would crack the foundation of an empire. Hello, Vincent. It's been 30 years. Because some debts don't expire, some sins don't wash away with money and magazine covers, and some people don't forget. They just wait tables and watch and remember everything. Harvest and Hearth was Vincent Shaw's crown jewel, his flagship, the restaurant that proved he hadn't lost touch with his roots. Even as his bank account had grown 9 zeros deep, the decor was carefully curated rusticity. Exposed bricks sandblasted and sealed. Reclaimed wood beams, purchased from a specialty supplier in Vermont. Edison bulbs, hanging from iron fixtures that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The menu promised honest food honestly made, which translated to $30 mac and cheese. And $45 meatloaf, farm to table, artisanal, authentic. Vincent loved the irony. He'd grown up eating government cheese and food bank pasta. Now he sold the aesthetic of poverty to people who'd never missed a meal in their lives. And they ate it up, literally. They waited 2 months for a reservation. They posted photos on Instagram. They told their friends they'd experienced real American cooking. It was beautiful. It was profitable. It was the ultimate revenge on the poverty that had marked his childhood. Tonight, Vincent sat at table 1. The power table, positioned in the center of the dining room, where everyone could see him, where he could hold court, where diners whispered and pointed, and felt special just sharing oxygen with him. He was 58 years old, handsome in that weathered, rugged way that men with money aged into. His hair was silver, perfectly cut, his face was tanned, lined in ways that magazines called distinguished. He wore jeans, expensive jeans, the kind that cost $600 and were designed to look like they'd been through hard labor. A white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to show off a Rolex Daytona, working man's uniform. Billionaire's price tag. With him sat 3 people, his current wife. Number 4, Melissa, 29 years old, former Instagram influencer. Currently, decorative. She picked at a salad, laughed at everything Vincent said, with a breathless enthusiasm that suggested either genuine adoration or a very good prenup. Across from them sat Richard Chen, Vincent's CFO. To Stanford MBA, who had sold his soul for stock options, and now spent his days making Vincent's numbers look better than they were. And finally, Amber Reeves, the ghostwriter Vincent had hired to pen his upcoming memoir, From Hunger to Harvest, The Vincent Shaw Story. She was recording everything. Every gesture, every word. Building the mythology in real time. The secret, Vincent was saying, his voice loud enough to carry to nearby tables, is never forgetting where you came from. I still remember what commodity cheese tastes like. What it feels like to wear shoes until the soles have holes. That hunger, that drive. That's what separates people like me from people who inherited their money. He gestured broadly, performatively. I earned every single dollar. Nobody gave me anything. Nobody opened doors. I kicked them down. Melissa gazed at him adoringly. Richard nodded with practiced enthusiasm. Amber scribbled notes. The nearby tables smiled, inspired, moved. Here was proof that America still worked. That dreams still came true. That hard work still mattered. Vincent picked up his wine glass. A 2015 Châteauneuf du Pape. $180 a bottle. He swirled it, inhaled, took a sip. This was his moment, his stage. The server appeared. A young man. Early 20s, nervous, he carried a large plate. Steam rising. He set it before Vincent with trembling hands. Vincent looked down. His face darkened. The transformation was instant, complete. The warm, inspiring mentor vanished, replaced by something cold, something cruel, something that proved the trailer park hadn't been left behind. It had just been buried under Italian leather. And media training. What? Vincent said slowly, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. Is this? The young server swallowed hard. Your entree, sir, the braised short rib with, I ordered the lamb. Vincent's words were ice, sharp, cutting, the herb-crusted lamb. Medium rare, with the rosemary reduction. He picked up his fork, pushed the plate away, as if the food itself was offensive, contaminated. This is not lamb. I'm so sorry, Mr. Shaw. There must have been a mix-up in a mix-up. Vincent's voice rose, not shouting. Not yet, but loud enough that conversations at nearby tables began to falter, to stop in my restaurant. At my table, on a night when I'm entertaining guests, he gestured to Amber. When I'm literally being interviewed about my commitment to excellence, to quality, to never accepting mediocrity, he stood, slowly, deliberately, the way a predator stands before striking. Do you know how much this restaurant grossed last year? The server's face had gone white. No, sir. I tell you, $42 million. Vincent's voice carried now, filled the space, commanded attention. Every eye in the restaurant was on him, on the young man trembling before him. 42 million. Because I demand perfection. Because I built this brand on the promise that we don't make mistakes. That we don't serve the wrong dish. That we don't disappoint. Melissa had stopped eating, her face carefully neutral. This wasn't her first time witnessing Vincent's rages. Richard stared at his plate. Amber had stopped writing, her recorder still running, capturing everything. The nearby diners watched with horrified fascination. The way people watch car accidents, unable to look away. I don't accept excuses, Vincent continued. His face was flushed now, red creeping up his neck. I grew up with nothing. Nothing. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through community college. I slept in my car. I ate ramen for 2 years straight. I built this empire from the ground up. 'Cause I refused to accept failure. And you're standing here, in my restaurant, telling me about a mix-up? The young man's hands were shaking. Sir, I'll get you the lamb right away. I'll personally make sure. You'll personally make sure? Vincent's laugh was cruel, mocking. You couldn't personally make sure the first time. Why should I trust you now? He turned, addressed the entire room. Playing to his audience, this is what I'm talking about. This generation, they don't understand work ethic. They don't understand pride. They show up. They collect a paycheck. They make mix-ups, and they expect participation trophies. The young server's eyes were wet, brimming, but he held Vincent's gaze. I apologize, Mr. Shaw. It won't happen again. You're right, Vincent said coldly. It won't because you're fired. The word hung in the air, heavy, final. The server blinked. Sir, fired. Vincent repeated louder. Get out of my restaurant now. Mr. Shaw, please. I have student loans. I'm trying to save for... Not my problem. Vincent's voice was flat, emotionless. You made a mistake. Mistakes have consequences. That's life. That's business. Now get out before I have security escort you. The young man stood frozen for a moment. disbelief and devastation warring on his face. Then he nodded. Once, removed his apron, dropped it on the floor, and walked toward the exit. Head down, shoulders shaking. The restaurant was silent. Absolutely silent. Vincent sat back down, picked up his wine glass, took a sip. "Now," he said to Amber, his voice casual again, easy, as if nothing had happened. "Where were we?" Oh yes, the importance of maintaining standards. It was at that moment. Claire appeared at the table, moving through the silence like a ghost through fog. Her face blank, professional, but her eyes were different. They held something Vincent didn't recognize. Something that should have warned him, should have made him careful. She held a small leather folder. The check presenter. "Mr. Shaw," she said quietly, her voice low but clear, carrying in the silence, "I believe this belongs to you." Vincent didn't look up immediately. He was still performing, still playing the role of the tough but fair businessman, teaching a valuable lesson. He waved a dismissive hand at Claire. "We're not ready for the check yet. Bring the lamb, the correct order, and make sure it's perfect this time." "I'm not bringing you the check, Mr. Shaw." Claire's voice was steady, calm, but there was steel underneath, something that made Vincent finally look at her. Really look at her. She was older, maybe late 50s. Her hair was brown streaked with gray, pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her face was lined, tired, the kind of tired that comes from years, not days. She wore the same uniform as every other server, the burgundy apron, the white shirt, the black slacks, nothing remarkable, nothing memorable. The kind of woman who had learned to be invisible, because visibility was dangerous, but her eyes were sharp, clear, intelligent, and they were looking at Vincent with something he rarely encountered. Not fear, not admiration, not the desperate need to please that he'd come to expect from service workers. Something else, something that looked almost like recognition. Vincent frowned. "Do I know you?" "Yes," Claire said simply. "You do. Or you did 30 years ago, before you became Vincent Shaw, restaurant mogul, before the empire, before the Forbes list, before you rewrote your history." She placed the leather folder on the table. "Not the check presenter. Something else, back when you were Vince Kowalski, from Riverside Mobile Home Park, Lot 47, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama." The blood drained from Vincent's face. Actually drained, like someone had opened a tap. That name, that place, he'd buried them. Legally changed his name 28 years ago. Erased every trace of Vince Kowalski from public records, from Google searches, from his own carefully constructed biography. Vincent Shaw had no past before the age of 30. That was the story. That was the brand. Vince Kowalski didn't exist except he did. And this woman knew. Melissa was looking between them, confused. Richard had gone very still. His CFO instincts, sensing danger. Amber's pen hovered over her notepad. Frozen, the nearby tables strained to hear, sensing that whatever was happening was bigger than a wrong dish. "I don't know what you're talking about," Vincent said. His voice was careful now, controlled. The rage from moments ago replaced by something colder, more calculating. "My name is Vincent Shaw. It's always been Vincent Shaw. And I've never heard of whatever place you just said." Claire smiled. It was a sad smile, a smile that had seen too much. "Lost too much. Riverside Mobile Home Park," she repeated. "You lived there from 1985 to 1994. Lot 47, with your mother, Nancy Kowalski. And your little sister," she paused. Let the words hang. Me, the world stopped. Actually stopped. The ambient noise of the restaurant, the clinking silverware, the soft jazz, the murmur of conversation, all of it faded into white noise. Into nothing. Vincent stared at the woman before him, his mind racing, calculating, denying, but somewhere deep, somewhere he'd tried to bury. He knew he recognized her. The shape of her eyes, the line of her jaw, older now, worn down by life, but still there, still visible, if you knew where to look. "Claire?" The name came out as barely a whisper, a ghost of a sound. "Hello, Vince." Her voice was soft, but it carried, clear as a bell in the silent restaurant. "It's been 30 years. I've been working here for 11 months, serving you, refilling your water, clearing your plates, watching you perform your rags to riches story for investors and journalists. And your pretty young wife, listening to you talk about how you did it all alone, how nobody helped you, how you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. She opened the leather folder. Inside was a photograph, old, faded, creased from being carried for decades. She placed it on the table. Face up, I thought you might want to remember who actually helped you. The photograph was small. 3 by 5, the colors had faded. That yellowish tinge that marked the 90s. The paper was soft, worn from being handled, from being looked at, from being carried, as evidence of a life someone wanted desperately to forget. And someone else couldn't afford to. It showed 2 people, a young man, maybe 28, thin, wiry. With dark hair and intense eyes, he wore a cheap suit, too big in the shoulders, the kind you bought at Goodwill for job interviews. He was smiling, that fierce, hungry smile of someone who believed the world was about to open up for them. Next to him stood a girl, 17, maybe 18. She wore a graduation gown, royal blue. Her hair was long, brown. Her smile was proud, nervous, hopeful. The kind of smile that belonged to someone who thought graduation meant the beginning of something, not the end. Behind them, barely visible, was a mobile home, beige with brown trim, lot 47, and standing in the doorway, a woman, late 40s. Gray hair, tired eyes, watching her children with an expression that mixed love and worry in equal measure. Vincent stared at the photo. His hands moved involuntarily, reaching for it, then stopping, as if touching it would make it real, would confirm something he'd spent 3 decades denying. "That's you," Claire said quietly. She pointed to the young man in the cheap suit. "The day I graduated high school. By 1994, you'd just gotten your first real job. Assistant manager at that steakhouse in Birmingham. You drove 3 hours to be there. Showed up in that suit Mom helped you pick out at the thrift store. You told me I was going to do great things. That education was the ticket out. That you'd make sure I got to college. That we were a team." Her finger moved to the girl in the gown. "That's me, valedictorian. Full scholarship to Auburn. Mathematics major. I was going to be a teacher. Maybe a professor. I was going to change the world." Her voice was steady, but there was an ache underneath, a wound that had never healed. "You promised. You said you'd help with the expenses the scholarship didn't cover. Books, housing, food. You said family took care of family. That we were a team." Vincent's jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the photo, but he said nothing. "I started that fall," Claire continued, "and you did help. For a while, you sent money. Not much, $50 here, $100 there, but it helped. Kept me afloat." She paused, took a breath, and then, spring semester of my sophomore year, the money stopped. No explanation. No phone call, nothing. I called you, over and over. You never answered. I wrote letters. They came back unopened. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping, but somehow becoming more powerful, more present. "I had to drop out. I couldn't afford books. Couldn't afford rent. I moved back to the trailer park. Got a job at Walmart. Minimum wage. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd save up, go back to school, but Mom got sick. Cancer, stage 4. Someone had to take care of her. Someone had to work to pay for her medications, her treatments. The bills that kept piling up." Melissa's face had gone pale. Richard was staring at Vincent. Amber's recorder still running. The nearby tables were silent. Absolutely silent. Everyone was listening now, watching, understanding they were witnessing something bigger than a family drama. They were watching the demolition of a myth. "I worked 3 jobs, Claire said, her voice soft now, almost gentle, as if she were simply recounting facts, as if the pain had been absorbed so deeply she could speak of it without breaking. Walmart during the day, cleaning offices at night, weekend shifts at a diner. I was 20 years old, and I was exhausted and alone because my brother, the one who promised we were a team, had vanished." Vincent finally spoke, his voice rough, defensive. "I was building something. I was working 80-hour weeks. You didn't have time?" Claire's voice cut through his excuse like a blade. "You didn't have $50? A phone call? An explanation?" She shook her head. "No, Vince, you had shame. You were moving up, getting better jobs, meeting better people, and you didn't want them to know you came from a trailer park that your mother was dying of cancer in a mobile home in Alabama, that your little sister was working 3 minimum wage jobs just to survive. She tapped the photograph. So you erased us, changed your name, rewrote your history, became Vincent Shaw, the self-made man, the bootstraps hero, the inspiration. Her eyes met his, hard, unforgiving, and you left us behind, to die. That's not fair. Vincent's voice was rising again, defensive, angry. I was trying to survive. To build a future, I couldn't. Mom died in 2001. Claire's words were simple, factual, but they landed like hammer blows. 7 years after you disappeared. 7 years of chemotherapy, radiation, pain. 7 years of medical bills that bankrupted us. That took the trailer. That took everything. She asked about you. Every single day wanted to know where you were. If you were okay. If you were coming back. Claire's voice cracked. Just slightly. Just enough to show that beneath the steel, beneath 30 years of survival, there was still a woman who had loved her brother, who had believed in him, who had been betrayed in the most fundamental way possible. I lied to her. Every day I told her you were busy, that you were working hard, that you'd visit soon. I couldn't tell her the truth, that you'd abandoned us, that you were too ashamed of us to even send a card, a letter, anything. She pulled another item from the folder, small white card, bent at the corners, yellowed with age. This arrived 2 weeks after she died, forwarded from the trailer park. The new owners sent it on. She placed it next to the photograph. Your wedding invitation. To wife number 2, I think. Melissa might be number 4. I've lost count. Vincent's face had gone from pale to red, mortified rage warring with shame. The invitation was there, proof, black and white. Embossed lettering. Vincent Shaw and Gabrielle Montgomery request the honor of your presence. A destination wedding. In Napa Valley, spring 2001. I couldn't afford the flight, Claire said softly. Obviously. But I called the number on the RSVP card. Got your assistant. Asked if I could speak to you. Just for a minute. To tell you about Mom. To let you know she'd passed. Her voice hardened. Your assistant told me you were very busy. That you didn't take unsolicited calls. She asked if I was trying to sell something. I said no. I said I was your sister. She laughed. Said Vincent Shaw didn't have a sister. Said if I called again, she'd notify security. The restaurant was a tomb. Silent, breathless. Even the kitchen noise had stopped, as if the entire building was holding its breath. Melissa had tears in her eyes. Richard looked sick. Amber's hand was shaking. The recorder still running, still capturing. This wasn't the book Vincent had commissioned. This was something else, something true, something devastating. I've moved around, Claire continued, city to city, job to job, waitressing mostly, some retail, whatever paid the bills. I never finished my degree, never became a teacher, never changed the world. She gestured to herself. The uniform, the tired face, the gray hair. This is what I became instead, invisible, forgettable, just another woman serving food. To people who don't see me, she leaned forward, her voice dropping to something almost intimate, almost gentle. And then, 11 months ago, I saw a news story about a new restaurant opening in Nashville, Harvest and Hearth, owned by Vincent Shaw, the billionaire, the self-made success story. They showed footage of you at the ribbon cutting, talking about your humble beginnings, your commitment to honest food, your roots. Her smile was bitter, and I recognized you even with the new name. The expensive suit, the silver hair. I recognized my brother. Vincent opened his mouth, closed it. There was nothing to say, no spin, no corporate language, no carefully crafted narrative could erase what she was revealing. The truth was sitting there, in black and white, in a faded photograph, in a wedding invitation, in 30 years of abandonment. So I applied, Claire said. Got hired. It's not hard to get a job as a server when you're over 50 and invisible. They don't think you'll steal. They don't think you'll cause problems. They just need someone to carry plates. Refill water glasses, she straightened. And I've been doing exactly that for 11 months, watching you, listening to you, waiting. Waiting for what? Vincent's voice was barely audible. Claire's smile was sad. Tired, final. For this moment. For the moment when you'd remember what it feels like. To be humiliated in public. To have your dignity stripped away in front of an audience. To be treated as if you're nothing. Less than nothing, she gestured to the door. Where the young server had been fired. That boy. The one you just destroyed. He reminded me of me. Young, trying. Making mistakes because he's human and you crushed him. Without hesitation. Without mercy. Just like you crushed me. She picked up the photograph. Held it for a moment. Then placed it back in the folder. So I waited until you were here. With your wife. Your CFO, your ghostwriter. With an audience. And I brought you the truth you tried to bury. The truth you hoped everyone had forgotten. Her eyes met his one last time. I haven't forgotten, Vince. I never will. Vincent sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing, like a fish drowning in air, every weapon in his arsenal, every tool he'd used to build his empire, the charm, the aggression, the carefully constructed narrative. All of it was useless here. There was no spinning this, no reframing it, no way to make 30 years of abandonment sound like anything other than what it was. Betrayal, cowardice, shame dressed up as ambition. Melissa was staring at him, not with the adoring gaze she'd worn all evening, but with something else. Something that looked like she was seeing him for the first time. Really seeing him, the influencer who had married money, was discovering that the money came with a cost. A past that contradicted everything he'd told her, everything he'd promised. Richard's face was gray. The CFO and him already calculating, already running damage control scenarios in his head. This was bad. This was catastrophic. The brand, the book, the carefully maintained image of Vincent Shaw, the people's billionaire, the humble hero. It was all crumbling. In real time, in front of witnesses, in front of a ghostwriter whose recorder was capturing every devastating second. Amber had stopped pretending to be objective. Tears streamed down her face. She'd spent 6 months interviewing Vincent, collecting his stories, his wisdom, his inspirational journey. She'd believed in it. Believed in him. She'd been writing a hagiography, a testament to the American dream. And now she was watching it revealed as a lie, a fiction, a myth built on the bones of the people he'd left behind. The nearby tables weren't even pretending not to listen anymore. Phones were out, recording, filming. This would be on social media within minutes, viral within hours. The billionaire who abandoned his dying mother, who erased his sister, who built an empire on a foundation of lies. It was the kind of story that destroyed careers, that ended legacies, that turned heroes into villains overnight. Vincent finally found his voice. Came out wrong, defensive, angry. All the worst instincts of a man cornered. You don't understand, he said, his words tumbling out too fast. Too desperate. It wasn't like that. I was trying to. You don't know what it was like. The pressure, the expectations. I couldn't what? Claire's voice was quiet, but it cut through his stammering like a knife. Couldn't send a check? Couldn't make a phone call? Couldn't show up when your mother was dying? She shook her head. No, Vince, you could have. You chose not to, because we were inconvenient. Because we reminded you of a past you wanted to forget. Because you were ashamed. I'm not ashamed. Vincent's voice rose, loud, defensive, proving exactly what he was denying. Several diners jumped, startled by the outburst. I came from nothing. I built this. I earned this. You came from a family, Claire corrected. Her voice still calm, still steady. A family that loved you, that believed in you, that sacrificed for you. Mom worked double shifts at the plant to pay for your community college. Did you tell that story to Forbes? Did you mention that in your interviews? She paused. No, you said you were self-made. That you did it alone, but you weren't alone, Vince. You just decided we weren't worth remembering. Vincent stood, sudden, violent. His chair scraped back with a harsh sound that echoed through the silent restaurant. I don't have to listen to this, he said, his voice shaking, not with righteousness, but with something that looked suspiciously like fear. This is harassment, slander. I'll have you arrested. You'll what? Claire's voice remained soft, unmoved by his threats. Sue me? Call the police? Tell them your sister is telling the truth about your past? She smiled. That sad, tired smile. Go ahead, Vince, I have nothing. You can't take what I don't have, but every word I've said is true. Every document I've shown is real, and everyone here heard it. Everyone here recorded it. She gestured to the phones. The witnesses. Your story is out now. The real story. Not the one you paid a ghostwriter to create. The one where you're a hero, but the true one. Where you're just a man who chose his own comfort over his family's survival. Who chose money over love. Who chose to be Vincent Shaw instead of Vince Kowalski. Because Vince Kowalski had a past that didn't sell books. Vincent looked around the restaurant, at the faces watching him, at the phones pointed in his direction, at Melissa, who wouldn't meet his eyes, at Richard, who looked like he wanted to disappear, at Amber, who had turned off her recorder, but was writing frantically in her notebook. This wasn't the memoir anymore. This was journalism. This was the story that would define him, the truth that would follow him forever. "Get out," he said to Claire, his voice hoarse, broken. "Just get out," Claire nodded slowly. "I'm going," she said. "But first..." She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out one more piece of paper, placed it on the table, next to the photograph, next to the wedding invitation. "This is a receipt. From Western Union, March 15, 2001. 1 week before Mom died, I sent you a telegram. They cost money I didn't have, but I thought, maybe, if you knew how bad it was, if you knew she was dying, you'd come." The receipt showed the transaction. $20. A fortune for someone working 3 minimum wage jobs. The telegram address was there. Vincent Shaw. Care of Shaw Management Group. Birmingham, Alabama. "You never responded," Claire said. "Never called. Never came. She died alone. Asking for you. Wondering why her son didn't love her anymore." Her voice finally broke. "Just a little. Just enough. So yes, I'm leaving, but I wanted you to know. That boy you fired tonight, he has a mother somewhere. She probably loves him, believes in him, and you just destroyed his life over a wrong order. The same way you destroyed ours. Because we weren't profitable enough to keep." She untied her apron, folded it neatly, placed it on the chair. "Goodbye, Vincent. I hope your empire was worth it." Claire walked through the restaurant, her head held high, her steps steady. Every eye followed her, some with sympathy, some with shock, some with the dawning realization that they'd just witnessed something that would be talked about for years. The dismantling of a myth, the exposure of a lie, the quiet dignity of a woman who had waited 30 years for this moment and had executed it with surgical precision. She passed the bar, the hostess stand, the walls decorated with photographs of Vincent Shaw at charity events, ribbon cuttings, award ceremonies, all of them showing a man who had carefully curated an image. Humble success, earned wealth. The American dream realized. She wondered how long those photographs would stay up. How long before the lawyers arrived, before the crisis team descended, before someone tried to scrub this night from existence, but it was too late for that. The phones were already uploading, already sharing, already spreading the story across social media. Like wildfire through dry grass, by morning Vincent Shaw would be trending, not for business acumen, not for his inspiring story, but for abandoning his dying mother, for erasing his sister, for being exposed as a fraud. In his own flagship restaurant, Claire pushed through the front door. Into the Nashville night, the air was cool. October in Tennessee. The kind of weather that makes you think about transitions, about seasons changing, about endings and beginnings. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just breathing, just existing, feeling the weight of 30 years, lifting from her shoulders. She'd done it, she'd told the truth. She'd made him see her, made him remember, made him feel for just a few moments what it was like to be powerless, to be humiliated, to be treated as less than human. It wouldn't change anything, not really. Vincent would still be rich, would still have his empire, would still have lawyers and publicists to spin this, to minimize it, to frame him as the victim of an unstable woman with an agenda. But everyone who was there tonight knew the truth. Everyone who saw the photograph, the wedding invitation, the Western Union receipt, they knew. And that was enough. It had to be enough. Behind her, inside the restaurant, chaos was beginning to unfold. Vincent was shouting, demanding that everyone delete their videos, threatening lawsuits, making everything worse with every word. Richard was on his phone, calling the legal team, already trying to contain the damage. Melissa was crying, quietly, into her napkin, realizing the fairy tale she'd married into was built on lies, on abandoned family, on a foundation that couldn't hold. And Amber sat very still, her notebook open, her pen moving, writing the real story. The true story, not the hagiography Vincent had commissioned, but the journalism the moment demanded. From Hunger to Harvest would never be published. Not the version Vincent wanted, but another book might be one that told the truth. About the cost of the American dream. About the people left behind. About the families erased in the pursuit of success. A taxi pulled up. Claire had called it while she was still inside, knowing she'd need an exit, knowing that staying would only invite confrontation, revenge, legal threats. She opened the door, slid into the back seat. Where to? The driver asked, a kind-faced woman in her 40s, someone who probably had her own story, her own struggles, her own invisible battles. Just drive, Claire said. Away from here. The taxi pulled into traffic. The restaurant receding in the rearview mirror. Its warm lights, its carefully curated ambiance, its expensive promise of authentic American food, all of it built on a man who had forgotten what authenticity really meant, who had traded truth for comfort, family for fame, love for legacy. Claire looked out the window, at the city lights, at the people walking the sidewalks, living their lives, carrying their own stories, their own pain, their own victories. She thought about her mother. About Nancy Kowalski, who had worked double shifts, who had dreamed of her children doing better, having more, being more. She'd gotten half her wish. One child had achieved everything. The other had sacrificed everything, and only one of them had stayed human in the process. Mom, Claire whispered to the window, to the night, to the ghost that had lived in her heart for 23 years. I told him. I made him remember. I made him see. Tears finally came, not from pain, not from anger, but from release, from completion. I hope you heard me. I hope you know I never forgot you. I never stopped loving you. Even when he did. The taxi drove on, carrying her away from the restaurant, away from Vincent Shaw, away from the confrontation that had defined her life for 30 years. She didn't know where she was going, didn't have a plan, didn't have much money, but she had something she hadn't had in decades. She had her voice back, her truth, her dignity, and no one, not even a billionaire, could take that from her again. 3 days later, the internet was still on fire. Vincent Shaw exposed, trending everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit. The videos from that night at Harvest and Hearth had been viewed millions of times, dissected, analyzed, shared with commentary that ranged from outrage to schadenfreude to genuine heartbreak for Claire. That news outlets picked it up. CNN, Fox, MSNBC. They ran segments, interviewed witnesses, tracked down old classmates from Tuscaloosa, people who remembered Vince Kowalski, who confirmed the trailer park, the mother, the sister, people who knew the family before Vincent Shaw had been born, before Vince Kowalski had been erased. The business press feasted. Forbes pulled their recent cover story, the one that had called him the people's billionaire. Restaurant journals ran pieces about toxic workplace culture, about the young server he had fired, about cruelty, disguised as standards, about the cost of unchecked power. And Amber Reeves, the ghostwriter, she held a press conference, returned the advance for From Hunger to Harvest, announced a different book, an unauthorized biography, already sold to a major publisher. 6 figures. The title, The Man Who Forgot His Mother, The True Cost of the American Dream. Vincent's lawyers tried everything. Cease and desist letters, threats of lawsuits, defamation, breach of contract, emotional distress. But the problem with truth is that it's hard to sue away, especially when it's documented. When there are photographs, receipts, wedding invitations, witnesses, video evidence, all of it. Time-stamped, uploaded, archived, a dozen different places. Shaw's. Table stock dropped 18%. Franchise owners panicked. Investors demanded answers. The board called an emergency meeting. Richard spent 3 days in damage control, issuing statements, apologizing, promising reforms, trying to separate the brand from the man. But they were the same thing. That was the problem. Vincent Shaw was Shaw's table, his face, his story, his mythology, and now the mythology was revealed as a lie. Melissa moved out, packed her bags, filed for divorce. The prenup was ironclad, but she didn't care. She wanted out. Wanted distance. The inspiring entrepreneur, the humble success story, had turned out to be Vince Kowalski, a man who abandoned his dying mother, who erased his sister, who built an empire on shame and lies. Vincent sat alone in his penthouse, 10,000 square feet, $12 million, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Nashville. It felt empty, echoing, cold. A mausoleum. For the man he had pretended to be, he'd been drinking. 3 days of whiskey, 3 days of rage, 3 days of desperate calls to lawyers, all with the same answer. There was nothing to be done. Claire hadn't lied. She hadn't defamed him. She had told the truth, and truth isn't illegal. His phone buzzed. Another news alert. Another article. He threw it. Watched it shatter against imported marble. The sound was sharp, satisfying, but meaningless. Then, a knock at the door. He didn't move. Didn't answer. The knocking continued, insistent. Finally, he stumbled to the entrance. Looked through the peephole. A man, late 30s, jeans, t-shirt, holding an envelope. Vincent opened the door. Cautious, defensive. What? Vincent Shaw. Who's asking? My name is Daniel Martinez. Process server. He held out the envelope. You've been served. Class action lawsuit. 43 former employees of Shaw's table. Wrongful termination. Hostile work environment. Emotional distress. He pressed the envelope into Vincent's hands. Have a good day, sir. And walked away. Vincent stood there, holding the envelope. 43 employees. How many others? How many people had he fired? Over wrong orders? Over small mistakes? Over being human? How many lives had he damaged? In the pursuit of perfection, he closed the door. Opened the envelope. Scanned the first page. Detailed, thorough. Names, dates, stories. People he barely remembered. People as invisible to him as Claire had once been. People now emboldened by her courage. Ready to speak, Vincent walked to the window. Looked down at the city, at the lights. At the people. Anonymous. Free, unburdened by the weight of his crumbling empire. And he thought of Claire, his sister, the girl in the graduation gown, who had believed in him, who had trusted him, the girl he erased, because she reminded him of a past he couldn't profit from. 6 months later, Claire sat in a small coffee shop. Portland, Oregon, as far from Nashville as she could get, without leaving the mainland. The place was nothing special. Local, unpretentious, a spot where people actually talked, instead of performing for Instagram. Her laptop was open. An email draft on the screen. From a literary agent in New York. Your story has resonated with millions. I believe there's a book here. Not just about your experience, but about all the invisible people in service industries. The ones treated as less than human. The ones who watch the powerful perform their myths. While reality tells a different story. If you're interested, I'd love to discuss representation. Claire stared at the words. A book, her story. Not filtered, not twisted. Her own voice. The voice she'd buried for 30 years. The voice Vincent had tried to erase. She thought of her mother, of Nancy Kowalski, who had dreamed of her daughter becoming a teacher, a professor, shaping minds, changing lives. Maybe this was another version of that dream. Maybe teaching didn't always happen in classrooms. Her phone buzzed. A text, unknown number. She almost ignored it. But something made her look. Claire. It's me, Vince. I know I have no right. But I need to talk to you, please. Her first instinct, delete it, block it. Protect the boundaries she had set that night. But curiosity. One. Or maybe memory. The memory of a brother who once drove 3 hours to watch her graduate. Who had promised they were a team, she typed back. Why? The reply came fast. Because you were right. About everything. And I need you to know that. They met 3 days later, in a park. Downtown Portland. Neutral ground. Public, safe. Vincent looked different, smaller. The expensive armor was gone. Jeans, a plain jacket. Hair longer, less styled. The silver had dulled to gray. He looked 10 years older, the lawsuit. The divorce. The collapse of his empire. It had all carved lines into him. They sat on a bench. Not too close. Watching joggers, families, dog walkers, normal lives for a while. Silence. Then Vincent spoke. his voice low, stripped of bravado. I've been going to therapy 3 times a week, trying to understand, trying to figure out how I became. That he gestured vaguely, as if Vincent Shaw was someone else, separate from Vince Kowalski. Claire didn't answer, just listened. The therapist asked me, when did I stop being Vince? When did I become Vincent? I couldn't answer. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small choices, each one pulling me further away from you. From Mom, from anyone who knew me. His breath caught. I told myself it was survival, that I had to erase the past to succeed. But that was a lie. I erased it because I was ashamed. Because I thought poverty was failure. That coming from nothing meant being nothing. Claire spoke softly. It doesn't. Mom taught us that. She was proud of where we came from, of what she survived. She never acted like we were less than anyone else. Vincent nodded. I know, and I erased her anyway. Erased you, built an empire on the lie. That I did it alone. That I was better, chosen. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Claire. I don't deserve it, I just needed you to know. You were right. About everything, and I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry. Claire felt tears. Not from rage. Not from grief. But from something deeper. Recognition the man beside her wasn't the billionaire anymore. Not the brand. Not the empire, just her brother. Broken. Stripped down to truth. What happened to Shaw's table? She asked. I stepped down. Sold my shares. They're rebranding, my name, my face. My story all gone, a bitter smile. You can't build an empire on lies and cruelty. Turns out, it collapses. And now? Claire asked. I don't know, Vincent admitted. I still have money, enough. But I don't want the penthouses, the watches, the performance. I've thought about going back to Tuscaloosa, to the trailer park. Lot 47 is empty, maybe I could buy it. Live there. Remember what it felt like to be Vince Kowalski. Would that fix anything? Claire asked gently. No, he whispered. Nothing can erase what I did, but maybe remembering is the first step. Maybe it's how I become someone real again. They sat in silence, the weight of 30 years between them. Finally, Claire stood. I need to go. I have a meeting with a literary agent. Vincent rose too. I'm glad, he said. I'm glad you're telling the real story. Our story, he hesitated. Will I ever see you again? Claire thought about it. The brother she loved, the man who betrayed her, the chance of redemption. I don't know, she said. Maybe if you do the work. If you change, if you remember that being Vince Kowalski was never something to be ashamed of, she walked away, leaving him with the truth. That success without humanity is just another kind of failure. And for the first time in decades, Claire felt hope not for Vincent, but for herself, for her story, for all the invisible people who had finally found their voice, because some truths are worth the wait, even if it takes 30 years to serve them. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the invisible people in your own life, please subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Have you ever felt invisible? Have you witnessed someone being treated as less than human? Share your story. Let's keep this conversation going. Because stories like Claire's remind us that everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves to be seen. Thank you for listening.